And kicking us off today is a panel discussion. I'm going to welcome our host of that panel to introduce the guests. It is the CEO of our platinum sponsor, Voiceflow. Please make Braden Ream feel at home with a big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Please, Braden Ream.
So we've got 3 panelists, 40 minutes of content. They have not been prepped about the final questions. And so we'll keep some spicy ones for the end. Can we welcome Marlinda, Colin, and Manny onto the stage? Woo. Welcome, everyone. First of all, welcome to UNPARSED, everyone. Some claps here. Woo! Who was here last year? Okay, great. So if you remember, we actually did a very similar panel last year, and since then, the space has changed a ton, and so the questions have changed a ton as well. So this will be fun. So we're going to start out with a question for everyone. How have your teams applied generative AI in the past year? Can you? And I know that, of course, there are going to be some things that are under NDA and you can't say. But from what you can say, what are some of the projects that you actually gone ahead and launched? Maybe, I guess, Marlinda, if you want to start.
Yeah, so for us at Zendesk, and so I work on the customer support chat bot for our customers, and we're still kind of in the middle of experimenting with a lot of things. We started with AI as our fallback, and really no surprising there. We're coming across hallucinations. Why did it pull this information from this article that a product that has been archived? Like, why is it mixing NPS and CSAT, and we're just still kind of trying to dig that down. And it gets complicated when we're doing translations and multilingual bots too.
Yeah. Colin?
Well, we kind of made the decision to go AI first about a year and a half ago. So we've been working with it a lot. The directive was we were to not automate about 90% of what we do between now and the end of 2024. So the first major thing we did was we had experimented with a company called Forethought, but the first kind of in anger was actually Voiceflow. We deployed that for 5 of our products and very quickly scaled it up to all of them. So we had, I think the poster thing is it was 60% AI resolution on those chatbots by 12 weeks in. So that was kind of what we focused on. It was basically getting the knowledge base in, using your knowledge base system, fixing the intent system so that it was better at capturing what people were looking to do, and then it was just scaling it from there.
So who here has heard of Zendesk and Vodafone? Okay, everyone. Who here has heard of Trilogy? Cool. So Trilogy, and I'm queuing them up here. Trilogy is a really cool company. It is, would it be fair to describe it as almost like an AI first PE fund? Would that be like a...
That'd be pretty accurate, yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what you guys do? Because I think just it's a really interesting business model that wouldn't have been possible to the same degree a couple of years ago. So ChatGPT has almost enabled the business, at least in its most recent forms. Do you want to talk about it a little bit?
A little bit, in case the boss watches. Yeah, so basically we're like a private equity. It's one guy's money in the States, and he goes out and he buys companies that have high OpEx, but good customers. They're struggling a bit, and he basically brings them in and centralizes everything and automates as much as possible from the very start with the goal of automating everything. So yeah, basically we have about 90 products, and that's like 90 companies that we would have bought, integrated in. We say our goal is 1 every 2 weeks. At this stage, I think we're about maybe 4 to 8 a year, just given the climate we're in. But yeah, basically we go in, we buy the company. We have a full analysis that we do. AI has helped immeasurably with that as well. So we will basically go through the knowledge base, the tickets. From a CS perspective, there's other parts obviously as well, but we will go through all that side of things, and then we will import the company, importing in a knowledge base, create articles off of what's there already, and scale from there. So yeah, basically we run them then at a much lower OpEx and kind of into the future.
Yeah, I when I first heard about Trilogy, I thought it was really interesting because there's obviously AI first customer support, AI native platforms. It was the first kind of AI native business model, which I thought was really interesting. And then Manny, your team at Vodafone, what can you share about what you've shipped the past year?
I guess probably, if I take a step back, the first thing that we've had a chatbot running for like a number of years, and then we transitioned now into how do we get this into voice? So for 18 months, it's sort of focusing on transitioning, moving away from the old IVRs and having conversational ways of communicating. Then now, of course, over the last year, generative AI came onto the scene that completely changed the game. We've got a number of use cases that we've been looking at. One in particular is looking into how do we, I guess it's the agent assist use case of how do we completely apply generative AI to the knowledge bases that we have. Some challenges in there, of course. We've got a number of, we operate in a number of countries, and each country will have its own dynamics, its own challenges, different knowledge bases. You can see some of the challenges that we need to wrestle with on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. So Vodafone is well known to have a pretty robust conversational AI practice. We're now kind of in the, I'll call it the third, someone might argue it's the fourth generation of conversational AI, going from touch tone to NLU-based models and now generative AI. How do you manage transitioning between different tech stacks? Because of course, layers now, I'd imagine at Vodafone. So how do you think about incorporating some of the newer technologies while also not completely pushing aside the older ones?
It's a bit of a balancing step. Of course, there would always be the hype of, if I take a step back and just going back to the voice channel, you've got the old IVR and then you're trying to launch Toby Voice within that space. The easy option of why don't you just rip away the old IVR system and completely have Toby Voice?
Yeah.
But actually, you could go down that road, but that would actually cost you a lot more, and the returns would not be as good as what they could be, and probably cost you a lot more than what you need to do. But the reality of it is you can actually try and run them in a complementary way. Yeah. You maintain the old IVR system in there, but then at the same time start rolling out Toby Voice where it supports the existing journeys. Maybe there's a journey that you have that could never be served by the old IVR just because of the systems and the integrations that were there. Yeah. You can overlay that with Toby Voice where it's picking up some of that journey, and where the old IVR does well, it still runs through. Where Toby Voice adds value, it comes in and just improves the journey. So it's almost running the services in complementary, while you know that the long-term strategy is to ultimately replace the old IVRs and have Toby Voice running. But it's not, let's just roll out Toby Voice and close the IVRs. I think it's a more gradual process, balancing, knowing when to switch journeys across the different platforms, and knowing that actually there's no value in switching a journey into this new channel just because it might, have incremental improvement. Ultimately, it's where does the business value lie, and it's step-by-step guidance.
Totally. Marlinda, obviously Zendesk is one of the largest customer support automation companies out there, agent help desk companies. There are so many different parts of the customer experience that could be automated. How do you actually choose which part to automate? And then also, how do you think about NLU, sort of deterministic flows versus generative flows? How do you decide what use cases to automate, and then how to approach that automation?
Right now, the best way that we're starting with is still taking a look at the highest escalation rates for certain intents, which ones are the easiest to serve people to help them self-serve themselves. So like I said, we are definitely not going all AI. There are certain things that we don't want the AI to just handle. One of the things we implemented just this year is, and what I'm excited about for bots is now it's becoming more transactional. So we are enabling international calling for our customers. We have a flow, that allows customers to enable international calling. And so a customer will say, I'd like to enable international calling. We do the back-end checks. Is this person an admin? Do they have the right access? Are they logged in? All of that. Do they have the right account level permissions? And then once all those checks are done, then we say, okay, I can enable that for you. The machine does it, and then done. And that removes because all the customer support agent, they have to call, start a ticket, wait for a support agent to get back to them, look at the account, press a button, and then it's on. So remove that kind of interaction. That's just a couple of seconds, but it saves a lot of time for our agents. And
where do you think that generative AI is not the right fit when actually coming up with a conversational experience?
Things where it's really complicated troubleshooting flows, multi-steps. If it's just a simple answer, if you have an article that has, or an answer that exists in just one article, I think those are the ones we're targeting for Gen AI. Yeah. But for things like, I'm still having trouble logging in. here's an article that can help you. No, the customer ends up going in a circle.
Yeah. Colin, one of the things I've really enjoyed working with the Trilogy team is you are completely on top of all the new tech coming out. How do you decide when a new model comes out, you start a benchmarking process, when do you decide that it's actually ready for prime time in production? Because I think this is something we're all trying to come to grips with, is these models are constantly changing, there's new ones coming out all the time. When do you decide that it's ready to push to production?
Well, I suppose first of all, to give a concept of the team that we have and stuff, we are all proudly very nerdy and very kind of we very much we enjoy this. This is our pastime as well as our work. So the first thing is when a new model comes out, it's not will we experiment with it. It's like, would you stop experimenting with it? Enough people are experimenting with it. We don't need everybody trying it. The other thing is we built tools in the background. So one of the things is obviously we use Voiceflow for chat. We have another suite. We put an umbrella name of Atlas over all of our AI stuff that we built. And so we have a lot of other tools that are built there. So we have, we process 75,000 tickets a quarter. So we get maybe 1,000 data points a day of a customer issue that's there. And so we have tools built in where we can send the ticket multiple directions and within Zendesk post an internal note of what I would have done. And so basically we have that data point that if a new model comes out, we first of all just swap the model in our for that product and say, right, okay, just post internal notes for the day, what you would have done. Now we have two ways of kind of reviewing that. One is the manual, we'll go in and have a look, but we also have a tool we christened it. Basically, once Atlas was born, the Greek gods have every product has a name. It's Hermes, it's everything that they can find. But basically, Enki goes in and looks at the two answers and rates them. And so very quickly we have a data point of, well, we rolled it out a day ago. Enki thinks that 4.0 is doing this, whereas Turbo is doing this. And so we can very quickly kind of scale. So for us, what we did was we built that process in at the start so that we can always test out models. And we've gone to Anthropic, we've gone to, briefly for Gemini, but we won't. It's had its chance. But basically, that's how we've kind of tested them out. And it's a good system because we have empirical data after a day.
Yeah. Is Kathy Pearl in the room by chance?
Not yet, but she's coming. She's on
Okay.
the
Yeah. We got to give the Google folks some time here.
Yeah. I'm sure maybe we'll improve.
Manny, when it comes to actually building a team to deploy a generative solution, how do you think about staffing it? There's new titles that have popped up over the past year and a half: prompt engineers, prompt writers. Conversation design is changing as a I was going to say art form. That sounds a little fluffy. As a practice, how do you think about actually staffing a team for a generative AI project?
I think the first things first is probably just understanding the scope of what is it you're trying to achieve. And then off the back of that, if I take Vodafone, for example, we operate in a number of markets, and within those markets, there are different variables and different, access to resources that you can have in each market. So just understanding, first of all, what's the team structure? And I guess from a group point of view is what training can be provided to the resources that are currently available, taking them on the journey, making sure that there's training materials. And then at the same time, recognizing that the existing resources that you have, let's say, the traditional conversational designers that you have, you can still tap into those resources just by upskilling them to these new technologies that are coming in. Yeah. And the reality of it is the old technology is not going to go away. It's not going to go away overnight. So it's maintaining that balance of upskilling the resources, yet at the same time recognizing that it's a journey that everyone will have to go on.
Yeah. Speaking of upskilling, Marlinda, you've been a conversation designer, pre-ChatGPT, and now sort of having this whole wave come through. How have you been upskilling yourself and learning about these new technologies to actually incorporate them into the toolkit?
That's a really good question. I think I follow everybody in this room. No, really though, I think one of the things that really excites me about coming to conferences like this is just seeing how other people are implementing their bots. How are they thinking about automatic resolutions? I have a question for you later. Because of that, I think everyone has a different use case, everyone has a different team structure and how they define what their KPIs are. And I don't think I've ever met a one-to-one match to like, for someone who's doing something the way that I do. So it's always like learning what everyone else is doing and seeing what we can kind of combine and use and pick apart.
Yeah.
So
I've got a question for the whole group here. This is going to be a bit of a hot take, but are the days of deterministic flows numbered? And maybe Manny, we'll start with you.
I'd say, I guess it depends on what we mean by numbered. I think, is it going to change over the next 2-3 years? I don't think so. I think there's also a balancing act within business. I mean, ultimately what you don't want to do is you don't want to be rolling out generative AI to crack a nut. I think it's that balancing up, and I think that will probably run for a few more years. If you maybe expand the horizon to maybe 5-10 years, maybe, but I think certainly within the short to medium term, I don't think the days are numbered.
For us, if we didn't have deterministic flows, we wouldn't be anywhere near the resolution rate that we have. I can see and it's not like it's not shared with us every day. Hey, these guys are doing. Why are we not doing this? Yeah. We build functionality into, like, if you think of a support case, okay, how do I do this? Why can't I do that? They're the easy, low-hanging fruit. But if it's like, for example, we'd have a delivery app system in the States, and it might be we want to change the handheld device that this is running on. And so that requires an actual action to be taken. I would love to say would be great and it'll go off and do what needs to happen, but could you really say that to the customer? Hey, we're going to let that be created by something on the fly. What if something gets injected? So for those types of things, no, we still need those prescriptive things. I would say, yes, we'll get there, probably again a year or two, just to be sure, for security as well as everything else. But deterministic on those ones is really important for us. And so we're going to keep them, I'd say, for quite a while.
I would say the same for Zendesk. I mean, we segment like certain customer experiences. Is this a trial customer? Is this an enterprise customer? There's no way we're going to just hand that over to like an AI to figure out like what should I be giving, what kind of content should I be surfacing here for this person? We have to make sure, without a doubt, that they're getting the right flow, because then legal and security will be coming after us.
Yeah. How do you think about actually measuring success and resolution in the world of generative AI? So maybe Marlinda, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think, and that was my question for you because you had like an. We are exploring still just how many, which intent is being escalated the most still is like our core KPI that we're looking at right now. When it comes to satisfaction for the experience, it's a little harder because like some people like, I don't mind that this bot just threw 3 paragraphs at me, like it gave me the answer I wanted. So it's like, how do we know that this conversational experience is good? And so yeah, still a lot of things that we're working on.
Yeah. For us, we had a very clear, it was AI resolution. So in other words, did a human touch this ticket? That's the thing that we're supposed to hit 90% by the end of the year. Aside from that, I do look at the metrics as not so much the co-pilots, but like how much time was saved on the ticket by so basically just taking the data from last year versus this year. Yeah. How long did an agent spend on the ticket? Because we do have AI tools that at least prepare the ticket for an agent. So, is enough information there to solve it? Are the logs there, everything else before it goes to an agent? And when the agent gets it, particularly for some of them, we have like a pre-prepared work script. So in other words, it says, well, look, this is a request, and we centralize most things to ourselves. So we have a request in for a credit note. It'll prepare the DS before it comes to the agent. The agent just makes sure everything is right before passing it into NetSuite. So for us, it was, my bosses only care about AI resolution. That's the one that's posted up, and that's what we're rated on. But for me, it's also how efficient can we make the service reps that we have.
Yeah.
I think for us, we've got quite a good structure in terms of understanding what is the baseline for every use case that we're going after when it comes to Gen AI. Understanding the baseline and then building on of where do we think applying Gen AI in this use case will take us to, and then closely monitoring and staying close to that to understand actually if it's not delivering the value that we thought Gen AI would deliver, then we probably shouldn't be looking at it. So it's been very close upfront before any use case is rolled out, understanding what are the KPIs that we're going after. Is it AHT? Is it first call resolution? Establishing the KPIs, and then just making sure that we can manage them and monitor them.
Yeah. In each of your opinions, what is the biggest thing prohibiting your company from adopting Gen AI, or maybe not your company, but any, a generic company, in your opinion, from actually adopting Gen AI to a greater degree? Is it cost? Is it people, process, policy? Is it the technology itself? What is, in your opinion, the most prohibiting factor? And maybe, Manny, if you want to start. Generic company.
Yes, I think probably two come to mind. One is, I think from a security and privacy point of view, we still need to go into a journey. I wouldn't say they're the main blockers per se, but I think anyone that works in security, I don't think you're the main blockers per se, but I think I think it's a bit of a journey that you need to go on in terms of, I guess, an educational journey of this is what these technologies are bringing to the table. Yeah. And in some cases, it's not different to what was already in place. It's just maybe labeled differently. But I think that's the journey, and I think most privacy and security teams are still on the learning path. The other one I'll throw in there is probably the complexity of the technologies of understanding that not every use case or every issue that you have will be resolved by Gen AI. There's some places where actually the start-off places are, let's apply Gen AI and this will fix all of our problems. When you scratch beneath the surface, you find out that actually the problem that you have is more of a data problem, and you don't need Gen AI. You just need to make sure that your data is in a place, it's in a state where it's usable, and that's always you find probably most cases, that's usually the case, is maybe your data and the technology systems that you have are just not quite yet in the place where you need to start thinking of Gen AI. So I would say those two. You could throw in the third one of just even, I guess everyone's going on a journey, and these technologies are getting rolled out at a very rapid pace. It's having that view of we'll move from this step to that step, and almost ignore the noise that's happening on the sidelines. Yeah. Let's just move from this step to that step and understand once we get to that step, what do we need to do next? Because you could completely be reviewing a new business case each month because that's come out, that's rolled out, that will change our lives. It's new, but I think you do need to be structured and, I don't want to say rigid, but almost have your perimeters of ways that you're trying to go.
I thought that, I'm just going to double click on the, your data matter, especially if you're doing like a RAG-based solution, your data is so incredibly important. We had this, actually, it was, I think I speak to the Trilogy example where Trilogy was using the knowledge base at one point with I believe just the web scraper, right? And the data that was coming in from the web scraping was just not great. And so the answers weren't as good. And then it was only when a really structured import came in with a very structured JSON format, that made all the difference. The content didn't change. The actual knowledge base itself didn't change. Just the data was much cleaner in how it was structured, and that made all the difference. Yeah. So I guess, Colin, in your opinion, what is the thing most prohibiting a generic company?
I was just going to say, it's definitely not prohibiting us. The opposite. No, I suppose for us, well, I suppose one of the and all greatest respect to Zendesk, one of the other products that's in our portfolio is a product called Kayako, which is a ticketing-based help desk system. I'll say inspired by Zendesk, like it has some of the similar functionality. It's been around for, I think it's in our portfolio for maybe 8 years or something like that. But we said, well, we've built our Atlas suite of tools. It works based on triggers and lambdas. Why don't we add it here? So we've started to add it to that product, and they're selling it as a solution. Yeah. And what we're finding is you go out to onboard customers. And we kind of knew this anyway. We are blessed with the data. We have, because everything for us was standardized, always was at scale, we have thousands of pages of knowledge base articles. We have tickets where we document everything that had to happen for it to work. Now, there were still some issues with that because it documented what the first agent thought would work, and what the second agent thought would work, and then the AI has to define which one it was that actually worked, which is a bit of a pain. But we had all those data points. We go to other companies and you look at their ticketing system, and we knew this was going to be a thing because when we import companies and you go to their ticketing system and the customer says, this is my problem, and the solution by the CS guy is Needful was done. And it's like, how? What did you do? There's no content there. So the biggest blocker for them is, yeah, look, we can automate 60, 70% of what you do. We can make it streamlined, but you're going to have to put some time in at the start to clean your data up to make it useful. Or at the very least, if you're not going to do it now, start doing it now. So at least you have the content, because all that knowledge is just lost. I mean, the biggest sin, I think, in CS is if two people have to troubleshoot the same problem one after the other, and the first one didn't have, the second one doesn't have the knowledge of the first one to do it, because you've just spent twice the amount of time that you needed. So for us, that's what we see as being the biggest blocker, is the data itself. And then maybe, I suppose, hypothetically, like the decision makers in the company, generally speaking, would be slower to move. They might not be as tech savvy. And so I was at a meeting there recently where the person was like, I sent an email and I got GPT to write it the other day, and I'm like, dude, that's 2022. Like, I mean, catch up. And we were there trying to sell him AI solutions, and he's like, it reads a really good email, and we're like, yeah, it can do so much more.
Yeah.
And it's just that lack of knowledge there, and they're the people making the decision. So yeah, that'd be the two things.
I think it's really the same for us, and it depends on what point where we are in the process when it comes to just creating and iterating with just the idea and mapping where we want to go. It's security and legal that's involved, and not a blocker, like Manny said, but it took some time for even just us to implement our AI, like 2 months. They're just like, well, what does it do? How can it do that? And then when we created the enable international calling intent, we announced it to Zendesk, and they're like, wait, you're just going to turn it on for everybody? Like, no. So there has to be like the internal education for the rest of the company. And then afterwards, like the data, we have a lot of help documentation that's been written a long time ago. There was no content strategy maybe back then, and so it's just written in all kinds of different ways. So what I would love to do is rip everything apart, start from scratch. I don't know if this is like, no one's ever gonna say this, but like, I would love to experiment to see like if we consistently made our articles like this, had this structure, had bullet points here, could that spit out better answers for our LLM? I don't know, and maybe I will never know. But
That's great. So I'm gonna play a bit of a game with the audience here. We're going to see how many titles everyone's collectively had in the room. Who here has been called a VUI designer before? Okay, we got a couple. Okay, keep your hands up. How about chatbot designer? Okay, everyone keep your hands up as we kind of go through the titles here. Let's do chatbot developer. No. Conversation designer. Okay, quite a few people. Prompt engineer. Oh, yeah, so we have some folks who have had like 3 titles of the 4. And I think it shows how our industry's continually evolving. The titles are constantly changing. The people in the room are staying the same, and the rooms are getting bigger, which is great. But for the most part, it's really evolving. And so my question for the panel is, where does conversation design / prompt engine, like where does this all go next as a career path, as a role? Maybe Marlinda, we'll start with you.
I've been wondering that myself. Where am I going now? What does up look like from someone who's creating conversation design? I don't know that I can say that I have a vision for that. What I can tell you is there's something I'm frustrated with is just all the silos that exist within a company, being at customer support, and our bot also is like the one door for all our customers to basically get to a support agent. So you have finance coming at us saying, we want a chatbot intent that does this, and then sales, and then revenue, and then marketing. We want to do this. And so we're kind of like the team that first hears all the inconsistencies that are like kind of coming up in between these teams, and we have to be like, you guys have to talk to each other. We can't solve that for you. Decide, where is this? We can create this intent for you, but where does it go? And they're like, well, I don't know. So there's a lot of that. I think conversation design should sit higher, because I think we're just in an org, because we see all these inconsistencies, and we can help break down that silos within an org.
It's great. Promote the conversation designers.
Yeah.
Got a lot of votes in this room.
Yeah, for us, I suppose, and you'll forgive me the rag that is in my head, I am never good with names, so I don't know the guy who wrote the article about it, but basically we've redesigned how we are from being L1, L2 support. And I suppose to bear in mind, we don't have specific functions that would do these things that's within our control. So we have our L1 and L2 agents, the kind of ground troops who would solve tickets, are now called cyborgs, which is basically you're supposed to be an agent who's augmented with AI to be able to solve what you get. We then have conductors, who are the old L3s. So they're the guys, when I say the super nerds that experiment, they're the main guys that would do that. And their job basically is to create the tools that the cyborgs use and also to refine what we have. And then we have the centaurs, as they're called.
Are these real titles?
These are real titles. These are real titles. I kept SVP for myself. I've not gone with anything fancy yet. But centaurs are basically the old VPs, and their job is to be on top of everything and managing those overall products. So there is a guy who wrote this article. I have no clue what his name is. You can Google it very quickly. It'll probably come up. But basically, it was like, yeah. So we have cyborg, conductor, and centaur, and I can be pretty confident nobody will put their hand up for any of those names. It's unique to us, but it also is, particularly the cyborg, it's quite inaccurate. Like basically you're keeping the best parts of a human, but you're augmenting it where you can. And so, yeah, that's what.
So find Colin, you can talk about the recruiting process of how they hire centaurs and cyborgs later.
Yeah. Don't go to Glassdoor about it.
Unfortunately, the titles that we have are not as cool as centaurs, conductors, but I think that's something that we'll probably take away and see if we can jazz up our names, our titles.
You can be like Megamind, that can be yours.
Where do I think? I think one, just going back on, I think the titles will keep changing, but the people in the room will stay the same. I completely echo that. I think that's the way I see it. But I think also, I think the value that we bring to organizations will only increase as the technology that we're working with gets better. And I do see conversational design. I see people working within this space having a bigger sit at the table, per se. I think that's where the future is going to.
Yeah. So we're right up on time. So I've got one last big question, and it's fairly nebulous on purpose. Where's all this going? What is the next paradigm, in your opinion, of conversational AI? We've gone from deterministic flows with NLUs, still very much in use. Now people are experimenting with agents, with fully, RAG solutions, fully agentic workflows. There's tons of stuff being experimented. In your opinion, is this the final paradigm? NLU and deterministic flows, is generative AI all hype? Like, where's this going next? It's a very nebulous question about what you think is the future of conversational AI over the next 5 years. And maybe we'll start with Manny.
I was just thinking, am I allowed to steal the answer that you gave us earlier on about actually we need to start thinking of, I work in the voice space, so I'm quite close to the voice space, and I love that area. Currently we've got STT and TTS. Where this is going to, I'm literally stealing your answer, but I think you're pretty much on the money of, ultimately, to deal with the latency issue that we all face when it comes to the voice space, is actually this will become voice to voice, and no need for any transcriptions happening in the middle there. That's where I think this will go. I think that's the next step change. I think there's a lot of small steps that need to happen, but that's the next step change that we need to see.
Yeah.
I don't know where it is in the pipeline, and we've been mimicking it as best we can with our L2 troubleshooting and stuff, but critical thinking. So in other words, the ability to question what it is that you're generating. That comes about, well, you're pretty close then to AGI anyway, but it allows you to not have to QC, not to have to monitor it as much, because you're actually making the critical thinking step that's involved. We get that, which I think is possible. As I said, we mimic it at the moment. We've faked it as much as we can, and that's almost, at the moment, that's the most fun part of our process, is we know it can't critical think, but can we make it look like it's critically thinking and actually deliver the same result? And that, again, goes back to, I think, we have an L2 troubleshooting step where we basically sat with an agent and said, okay, you're our best agent on this product. What would you do to solve this ticket? And we literally documented each step. We put that into the algorithm, and so we do each one of those steps, and then we put it into an LLM to get that information together and output an answer. Works reasonably well most of the time. But if we really want to go to that next step for us anyway, it would be the critical thinking that we don't have to tell it that information.
Very cool.
And yeah, probably if there's 90% automation, there's probably less people in the room overall, but maybe there are more rooms.
My mind went in a completely different direction. Whenever I hear about the future of conversation design, I kind of think there was this meme I saw recently that says, we are automating our art, we are automating our work so that we can do more laundry, so that we can do more emails. And I think we have it backwards. I want AI to do my laundry so I could do more art. Yeah. So when I think about the future of conversation design, I wonder, and I'm having a lot of conversations with we're just talking about bots all day. I hope that this field in this industry starts to bring the conversation back to humanity.
That's a big final thought. I'll leave everyone with a quick intellectual experiment as well. So I think in a couple of years, the UNPARSED conference essentially becomes like an HR conference because we're all going to be managing agents. Today, we are all creating employee handbooks for these agents. We're documenting step by step on how to actually complete a task. As the agents get smarter and smarter, eventually it's about provisioning the tools. Eventually it's about provisioning what they can do, when they can work on it, how to treat a customer, how to talk to a customer in the same way, you might train a barista at Starbucks, it'll be us training an agent. So I think we all become HR professionals to some degree. And with that, can we thank our panelists? This was awesome. Great. Thanks so much, guys.